TiE Rajasthan event and interacting with the people from the ecosystem, people from the community, right? And very grateful to have everyone who's present. So I think before I start, let's make it interactive. We'll have a very interactive session. We'll interact quite a lot. So how excited you are about the session? So let's write that in the chat first. Like if you are on a scale of 1 to 5, how excited are you about the session? So start typing in your answers, right? 5. So 6. Wow. So you got a 6 as well, right? Some people are excited to the tune of 6, 10. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So let's go. We're all excited. And definitely we'll talk about how to move from the idea journey to the product journey, to the product journey, to the scale journey, to the revenue journey, from the revenue journey to the scale journey. So it's a short time. We have 1 hour with us. So I'll try my best to capture all of the learnings that I have myself learned over all these years running startups and investing in startups. I'll try to pass on all those learnings to you so that you can take a note of it. And of course, take those learnings ahead and scale your own startup. So let's get the ball rolling. I'll just give a very quick introduction of mine, although of course Arun has given one. But yep, my name is Aditya. I started my journey very young. I started my first startup when I was 15 years old. And since then it's been a crazy ride. This is the only thing that I know, which is startups, working with startups and taking them to the next level. And in the last, I would say, 9 years of my journey in the ecosystem, I built multiple startups. I've worked with multiple startups. And now in the last 3 years, I've invested in multiple startups too. So it's been a rock solid journey. When you start young, you of course get to be at a lot of places. So I think that has given me the chance to learn from from different people in different settings and take all of those settings and put that into practice. So yes, that is the long story short. In my current role, I'm the CEO of Faad. I'll tell the name behind Faad. I think that's a good way to start things. So Faad means awesome in Hindi. So we kept the name of the company as Faad because we want to do some Faad work. So that's who we are. So I think before again as I start, so Faad I think is a concept wherein we believe in taking startups to the next level. So if you think you are a Faad person, write Faad in the chat. Let's make it interactive. If you think you are a Faad person, write Faad in the chat. So yeah, a lot of people of course were Faad. So glad to see that. So now at Faad, what we do, guys, is basically we invest in startups, early stage startups. We put in capital, but more than the capital or more than the money that we invest in, we believe in taking those companies to the next level from our initial set of capital that we invest. That is the aim of entrepreneurship. When you are building a business, capital or money is something that you'll keep on getting as you grow. But how do you take that capital or those learnings to the next level and scale your startup? That is what it is important, right? It does not matter who started first or how small you were. At the end of the day, all it matters is were you able to create a big business out of it or not? Were you able to make a large impact on the society with your startup or not? That is what we believe on doing. So we've invested in close to 50 startups in the last 2 years. And I work with a lot of early stage investors to help make their investments fruitful. So yes, that is a very quick introduction about me. And I love working with young entrepreneurs. I'm myself, as I said, very young. So I love teaching or something about entrepreneurship. I love sharing my practical life lessons. And I love interacting. I'm not the person who would just go on and on. I love interacting with my audience. So yes, I think that sets the agenda for today. So I think before I start, let me just get a hang of who the audience typically is, although I'm sure all of you are young entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs. But how many of you actually have a startup? If you have a startup, write yes in the chat. If you already have a startup, we have two people, of course, here. And please guys, let's make it interactive, right? The least you can do is, of course, write yes in the chat. So, okay, no problem. Those of you who you don't, of course, I'm sure you are on the journey of entrepreneurship, and it's okay if you don't have a startup. So yes, but not registered. So even if you have a startup idea, you can write yes even if it's not registered. So I've got 6-7 response. Guys, please do respond that how many of you have a startup. So great. So a lot of you already have a startup, right? And some of you are on the journey of having a startup. So now, for those of you who have a startup, you have an idea, you have a concept in your mind. Okay, that this is where, let's say, I would want to build my company. Right? That idea could be anything. It could be, let's say, as simple as making, let's say, a tennis racket more analytics driven, right? That how do you play your shots, or how do you smash your ace, or how do you rotate your tennis sort of while playing in different rallies. So whatever the idea is, you have that in your mind. For those of you who have a startup. For those of you who you don't, you are still figuring out that which could be that one potential thing that I could pick up and solve for masses. One thing that you need to realize is that idea in itself is something that does not matter a lot at the end of the day. Idea is something that would definitely help you win, right? As the topic of today's session is ideas that win, execution that scale. Ideas is something that will definitely move you to the next level. But it is the execution of that idea which basically helps you to create a big business out of it. Right? Let's hear it again. That idea is something that I could create, but execution of that idea will help me create a big startup or a big business. Right? So what we have to make sure is two things. One, the idea that we pick up, whatever idea that we have right now, which we are building a startup, that idea has to solve a large problem. It has to solve a big problem, right? It cannot be a small audience. It cannot solve problems for a very, very small population. An idea has to be as big as a country, right? The market has to be so big so that ideas can truly solve something. That is first thing that you have to take forward. That the idea that you are building has to solve a big problem for the masses, right? For a big market. Second thing is that in itself, the execution of that idea will take you to the next level, right? How will you execute that idea? How will you take it ahead to the next to a big business or a big startup is something that will matter at the end of it, right? So two things we are keeping in mind. Now, all of us try to get the first side of the things correct, which is idea. All of us focus so much on the idea. All of us focus so much on the problem that sometimes we don't focus on the second aspect of it, which is execution, right? We focus so much on perfecting the idea or so much on perfecting the market that we don't focus on the execution side of things. Simple example could be, there are a lot of payment apps which came in, right? Lot of apps which helps you to transfer through your Paytm, through your wallet, through your credit card, through your debit cards. But there are a handful of companies which became big, like Paytm, PhonePe, BharatPe, Google Pay, a handful of companies which became big. All of them had an idea which was making transactions seamless, paperless, digital, foolproof transactions, right? But just a few mastered the code and became big businesses because they were able to execute it better at the end of the day than the rest of the businesses. The first businesses may have focused a lot on ideation, may have focused a lot on market, but the second business which came up focused a lot on customers, focused a lot on their needs of the customers, the times on which they are active, how do they go ahead and make their purchase, which technologies do they use. They focused on the second side of the problem. the second side of the situation, which is customers. These customers who give them money, these customers whose problems they solve, and they solve it using the best technology or the best way that is there out there. Right. The second aspect is the tricky one, which we call as execution. And that is where a lot of startups in India kind of don't go ahead and do very, very well. So when we are starting out as young entrepreneurs, one thing that we have to make in mind is ideas is a good thing to have. It will help us to move till point A to point B. But execution of that idea will make us to move from point B to point Z, right? That is where we have to focus on the execution side of it, right? The execution has to be seamless. Right? There's a very famous quote which says that when I have to cut a tree, I focus first 6 hours in sharpening the axe. I focus the first 6 hours in sharpening the axe. I know that if I sharpen my axe, the tree will be cut in the next 30 minutes or an hour or so. But the first 6 hours that I spend in sharpening the axe, that is me perfecting my execution. I'm preparing myself, my startup, my idea in order to execute that, right? The same person, other person may also cut a tree. They would also spend 7 hours, but they would put in a lot more efforts because they didn't focus on perfecting the execution. They may also quit in the middle, that I'm not able to cut down the tree. I will walk away from it. But the second lot focused purely on execution. They reduced their efforts of cutting the tree. They focused all the efforts into execution and then sort of went ahead and sort of started cutting the tree. That is where it's important to focus on the execution side of things. Any questions if there are, let us know, of course, and we'll be more than happy to answer it. As and when you start getting questions, please write them in the chat and we can answer. Now, I'll tell you with a personal example of mine as well. So, we started a student housing startup. Right? I'll tell that story. It's a very sort of interesting story. Started student housing startup. We realized that the problem is so big. Not a lot of students in Delhi University or wherever it is, they don't get access to good quality hostels, right? They sort of stay in PGs and toilets, where sometimes quality becomes a problem. So how can we connect and how can we have good quality PGs? That is where we went out and interacted with these hostel owners. We tried to standardize them, right? We tried to give a consistent quality in all of these places. And that is how we grew. The problem was large. Of course, students are not able to find PGs. PGs are not improving. It's like a fixed problem, right? But how do you go ahead and eradicate that? You go ahead, you focus on what are the pain points of your customer. You focus on what do they actually require, what target market they are in. You combine all of these facts, then you go ahead and you solve for execution, right? Similarly, when I started Education Yatra, a campaign in which I was teaching underprivileged kids, I realized that the idea is that education is broken system in India. As they say, education system has only two things missing: education and system, right? These are the two things missing, right? So we realize that the problem is of course too big, but how do you go ahead and solve that? You go ahead and solve that by interacting with your target market, by interacting with your TG and understanding what is their problems, what are their problems, what are their set of difficulties that they face, and how can you as a company, as a startup, as a business go ahead and solve that in the best way possible. That is with the share startup. So I realized that there are two things missing in education system. Not education system, that is definitely there. But two things were: one, that your class decides your IQ. If you are in class 10th, you are expected to have a higher IQ. If you're in class 8th, you are expected to have a lower IQ. Second thing, if I want to go to a higher IQ class, I have to wait till the time I eventually pass out till there. right? So I figured out these basic problems, such big problems. But how do you go ahead and solve for execution? You go ahead and you start figuring out your TG, teaching them the basics of education, profiling them not on the basis of their class divisions, but basis their whatever knowledge or whatever intellect level they are. Right? Basis that you profile them, you grade them, then you go ahead and you solve for execution. Right? This becomes a scalability solution. Execution that scales. When you identify your customer's pain point, when you identify your customer's target market, when you identify your customer's product, when you identify your customer's pricing as well, pricing power as well. All of that you combine, then you go ahead and solve for execution. Solve for execution so that it scales to the next level. So I'll pause for a bit now and I'll start taking questions. So can we have a general idea, then start off with the execution and slowly fine tune the idea as we develop a product? Absolutely, a very good question. So Skanda, you can definitely go ahead and have a general idea and then start off with execution very, very slowly and then develop the product. Amazon, when it started out, right, it started out as a book catalog. They were selling books only on their digital media. They realized that books is a very high volume segment, right? So if you have to sell books on online platform, you would also want to set up other things as well. That is where Amazon shifted to from a book selling platform to an e-commerce driven platform. And now Amazon sells everything from a pin to a plane, right? On Amazon. So that is how you start. You start with a general idea. Then you sort of develop it, you fine tune it, right? And then sort of develop as you move it. Airbnb, right? We all know Airbnb. When it started out, how did they start? They started putting out homes on Craigslist, which was a very popular US listing site. And then they slowly figured out that it's very difficult for someone to just buy homes which let's say are sort of unknown to them. Why? Because of course, at the end of the day, I have to move from one geography to the other. But how can I solve for execution? If I start putting people together in it, where I don't have to own the house, I can just stay in a house, have my bed and breakfast, and sort of just go away, right? So that is the genesis of Airbnb, right? Which is a very big company. It's a public listed company. So that is how you start with your execution aspect, and you develop the product as you get more feedback. Great. Second question I'll take, sir. I have a startup idea and I have almost everything set. I need to make a deposit to get the stock, but I'm not able to get the funding right. What do you think I should do now for the funds? Right. So when you're starting out, funding is something, of course, it will take some time for you to convince angel investors or to convince other reputed investors in your startup. But till then, what you can do is you can definitely figure out and maybe try to raise capital from friends, try to raise capital from family, try to raise capital from peers around, try to put in some of your own capital. That is how you start with the startup at early, right? You invest some bit of your own capital, or you invest, let's say, you raise some capital from incubators, you raise some capital from accelerators, right? So you start with that. You raise small capital. With that small capital, you finance your stock, your early team, your inventory, and then you put that capital into the business and you go ahead to the next level, right? So that is how you start, and start taking money from your customers as well. Some best form of businesses or startups are those, they take money from customers and invest that money back into the company. So if let's say you sell 10 goods, right? You sell it for, let's say 500, 600 rupees. Let's say for producing the next 10 goods, you require 300 rupees. So rather than going out in the market and raising 300 rupees from someone else, what you do is with 500, 600 rupees, you take out 300 rupees and invest that money back into the business. And the rest 200, 300 rupees, you keep that money into the bank for future contingencies. That is how you start with a startup. You start with a lean approach. You invest whatever money you get from your customers back into the business, and then you keep on going ahead to the next level. Hope that answers the question. What is the, yeah. So again, as I said, friends, family, bank may not work, but I think this is the aspect where you start making money from your customers and then start selling. Maybe don't sell the exact thing, right? Don't sell the exact product, right? But Try and sell an MVP. That is what we call a minimum viable proposition. Develop something. Start selling that minimum viable proposition to your customers. Take, even if it is, let's say, even it was, let's say, for 100 rupees, you take 50 rupees. Start with 50 rupees. Take 50 rupees, invest that money, go ahead. Start moving ahead. Start business in a lean manner. It will take time, but it will definitely come along as you get more audience. Great. So next is difference between startup and NGO. I think Arun is already writing an answer for it. It's a very big difference, right? Startups and how an NGO works. NGOs are more impact driven. Startup is more profit driven. It's more business driven, right? Startups also have a cause, but that cause has a monetary value attached to it as well. In NGO wise, is different. But again, I think Arun is already typing that answer, so I'll wait for him to give more detailed answer. And if you have more questions around startup and NGO, do ask. Feel free to ask. Next is, can we go through a different strategies to acquire customers and trust and go accordingly and use these customers base to attract the businesses as a client? So Rishabh's question is, can we go through a different strategies to acquire customers trust and go accordingly and use these customers base to attract the business as a client? So yes, you can use different strategies that are out there. You can do digital marketing, you can do online marketing, you can get customers from doing offline events as well, right? You can get, let's say, customers from referrals as well, from referrals from other people. So you can find other customers on different social media platforms and then get them to your startup as customers. So there are different ways of acquiring customers, right? And you can definitely use these customers base to as a client, right? So let's say if I acquire 500, 600 people for my startup, I try to sell them a service, right? Which is whatever that service may be. Let's say 10% of the people go ahead and buy that product, which is 50 people. It's a good enough conversion. So remember that you have built out a customer base, but then it's very important to extract some value from that customers as well. And that is where I say, you can acquire a customer, you have to keep on providing value to keep them hooked onto the business. But then you also have to start extracting some value from them as well. That is where the monetary value comes in. So yes, you can acquire customers with different strategies, win their trust slowly and steadily. And then, of course, sell to these customers anything. Credit, how it started, right? Credit acquired customers through CIBIL scores, through banks, people who have good credit history, people who pay loans on time, right? So they acquired these customers and then, of course, went ahead to sell their own products. That is how, of course, you kind of work, right? Various examples with us. So I think next question is, while validating idea, even though we know in mass they need a solution by articles or completely software based data, is it necessity to get into grounds and understand the real pain of customers or what they need? Does that take a lot of time, or is that even a better method to understand a market? So Sushma's question is that when you are validating your idea, right, you know that to understand the customer's pain, right, you would need some software, something. So should I take that to develop a lot of time, or like should I take that? It will take a lot of time, or should I just go ahead and talk to them directly? So Sushma, the better way is talk to your customers as much as directly as you want, right? Some products or services you will get, of course, you will get different various customers who are, let's say, using XYZ technology, but then you have to capture their feedback. You have to make them engrossed into your business. You have to make them customers into your startup for long. So to understand their pain points, talk with them directly, maybe do interviews, do surveys, whatever it takes to get their side of the problem, right? And that is how most of the entrepreneurs, most of the startups experience themselves, right? Either they are a part of the problem, or either they spend time with their customers and identify that problem. So if let's say Oyo started, right? How did Oyo start? Ritesh Agarwal, who's the founder of Oyo, he went to different hotels, right? He stayed in those hotels. He consumed their services, and that is when he realized that these are the things which are missing in a hotel. So when he started Oyo, next time he made sure that these are the things that are there in the hotel. So that is how you spend time with your customers. It can be through software, it can be through anything. But if you're getting a direct feedback from your customers by talking to them, nothing like it. So spend time with your customers, getting to know their feedback, and then of course make a choice accordingly. So next question is, when starting, when we don't have enough knowledge of finance and numbers, does it become a barrier in growth? Very interesting question. So Priyanka, when you are starting up, right, and you don't have, let's say, enough knowledge of finance and numbers, it it does not become, let's say, a complete barrier of growth. But then when you're starting a business, you are expected to know these things on the top of your head. Let's say if I'm starting, sorry, if I'm selling a product of 40 sorry, 40 rupees, then I need to make sure that these are the margins that I can make in that product or service. This is, let's say, the kind of revenue that I can hit with that product or service, right? This is the revenue potential of it. This is the gross margin potential of it. This is, let's say, the other profitability metrics of it. These are the cost on it. I should know these basic things, because if I don't know these basic things, how will I create the best product or service out there in the market? Remember, I have to create a long lasting business. So these numbers, all these costs, all these profitability, they do play a role in the long term sustainability of a business, right? So when you are starting a startup, when you're starting a business, again, you have to make sure that you have certain knowledge around finance and at least a basic knowledge of your product. You can definitely hire a team which is skilled on numbers and finance, but then basic numbers and knowledge, you can't say that I don't have any idea of it, so I can't answer it, right? You have to be answerable. You have to know these answers so that you can run your business in the best possible manner. Then it becomes very important for you to understand all of these things. I think next question that I'll take from the chat. What are the steps to start a software or mobile application service based startup in India? So again, whatever startup you start, as I said, the steps are simple. It's 5 steps approach. Steps are very, very simple. First, you start by identifying your problem. Second, you start identifying your customers' pain points and everything. You interact with these customers. You develop a product or a prototype, right? You get your first customer, you scale that customer money into, of course, more customers. Then you raise capital and you go ahead, right? The cycle continues in that manner. So steps, again, no matter whatever the startup is, you have to solve a problem and solve it in the best manner possible. To solve it with technology, you have to solve it with whatever, of course, integration or impact, but solve it in the best way possible for your target market or customers, right? How to start learning about all these. So what I can do is, from my end, I'll share a resource with you guys. Just give me a quick sec. So yes, you can start learning about these from a lot of sites. There is, of course, on TiE, you can find a lot of resources. I'm sure the TiE University cohort would have provided you with a lot of resources around how to learn about these things, how to go ahead and build a successful business. You can also watch Y Combinator's videos as well to understand more on how to sort of go ahead and scale your startup. What I've done is, on the chat, I've also added my no, just made a thing. I've also added my own channel link as well on the chat. So there I post regular videos around startups, around businesses, and sort of how to go about it. So make sure you sort of subscribe that channel if you want to, and yeah, you can learn from there as well. I try to explain with examples in the best way possible. So yep, this is the channel link that is there. I've just recently posted in the chat. Next question sort of I'll take will be, and then I think someone, Lokesh, raised his hand. So I'll go to Lokesh quickly as well. Job or startup, which one is the best choice for current passing out college students? See, there's no right or wrong answer to it, right? I can't say that. You have to decide for yourself. For me, startups are the best. For I'm sure Arun as well, startups are the best. But job or startup, which way to go forward? It's something that you have to pick it up for yourself at the end of the day. But no matter whatever you do, right? Just make sure that at the end of the day, you have to become a leader, right? Because India needs more leaders, right? India needs more young blood like you, young, fresh blood like you, who can go forward, make impact, and take India to the next level. There are a lot of problems in India. So we do need entrepreneurs to solve these problems. But again, if you're not passionate 100% about startups or entrepreneurship, never do it. But if you're 100% passionate about startups and entrepreneurship, never even think about 1% not doing it, right? So just figure out for yourself, what do you exactly want to do? You're right now very young, very early, right? So you can anyways take a risk, make an experiment, right? You can, if you like a startup, you can still go and do that. Even if, let's say, it does not work it out that way, you have the chance of course, doing something else as well later on in life. But if you don't explore, how would you do that? If I talk about my example, I also had a very clear opportunity to go into a job. But then I went to a business school and I started working with a startup. And things have changed pretty much since then, right? I've been working in that forever. So if I would have never actually explored this side of things, I would not have been sitting here in front of you. But the reason I was able to do that was because I had the courage to, let's say, ditch job and to focus on startup side of things to see if that can work as well, right? So yeah, that is how you decide what is best for you. Just take risk, be passionate in whatever you do, and success will come to you sooner or later. Yeah. So did someone raise hands as well? Not sure. Could see a few hands raising. I can go forward quickly to the person who's raising hands, and then I can answer Manoj's question last. But I hope you're enjoying the session, learning.
Aditya, there is an interesting question about initial customer acquisition as well. So I think if we can just put some light on that as well.
Yes. Yes. So again, as I said, how do you acquire your initial customers? The first strategy, as I told you, is you figure out who's your ideal customer profile. Let's say if I'm selling mobile, I'm targeting more. It's a very trendy, smart digital mobile. Then I'm targeting more of millennials, 18 to 24, 25, 26, that age group category, right? So that is when I'm more gravitated towards that side of the table, that segment. So I would figure out that where are they the most active on social media. So then my marketing would be, or my distribution, my communication would be around social media. So I acquire these users from there, and then just go ahead and of course try and sort of sell them to something. Right? Put a small price to them, but that may not be the full exact price. But at least start selling to get that confidence, conviction, and more importantly, also a feedback on whether this product or service actually works or not. So depending upon who your customer is, depending upon where are they most active, you figure out a strategy, you figure out a communication loop, you price it, and you go ahead and start selling it, right? You also set your marketing, you also set your, how will you pitch your product to your customers, you prepare that and you sell it, right? So if I have to sell you anything, I have to firstly identify what is your pain problem. So let's say if I tell you that buy this mobile phone, my pitch to you would be, you don't have let's say a mobile phone in the house, so this could be the first mobile phone that you will buy, right? So figure out what the problems are, make a focus strategy accordingly, figure out where are they most active, go ahead and sell it in the best way possible. That is how you start acquiring your initial set of customers. Yeah. The next question is how to do recruiting for a startup when you have no capital. Very interesting question. How do you recruit talent, right? When you have no capital, you can't give them a salary. How do you recruit? In that case, firstly, it becomes important. First is to recruit as many as lesser the people you can. First step is that, because you have to go lean, right? You have to go in a very, very, very concentrated manner. You can't have 100 employees on day one, because that would mean 100 cost, 100 people's salary you have to give. So how do you go out in a lean manner? That is, you should go for that, a lean startup approach, as we call it. So how you do it, either 2-3 ways you can do it. One is you do it, of course, as Skanda already said, which is offer them some equity. Let's say if you are willing to hire a co-founder, willing to hire, let's say, a technology person, give them some equity, right? That is one approach. Second approach is, let's say, if you can't give them equity, make it based on commission, right? Make it a success-based approach. Let's say if I give you X amount of work, that X amount of work would generate Y amount of revenue. And from that revenue, I will give you percentage of the profit, right? So for example, if you're hiring a person in sales, you go ahead and tell to them, go ahead and sell my product to 10 people. I'll give you 20% commission from the sales that you get, right? So that is how you maybe, what you do is you don't give them anything upfront. You time them up to an event. You're making it conditional. Like if you sell these 10 to these 10 people, I'll give you a percentage of the profits, right? So then you also make it conditional, right? You make it that. Or third is, what you say is an approach which is called as accumulation, or deferring the cost. What you say is, I can't pay you right now. I will collate all the money that you are earning while I'm not paying you, and probably give it to you at a later stage when the company grows and performs. This is where a trust comes in between you and the person. The person likes the quality of the work and says, okay, I can work for free, let's say for a year, 2 years, 3 years. After 3 years, when the company raises funding or the company grows big, company has more capital, that is when the company can pay for the entire 3 years to me all at once. That is also a very good strategy and approach. Or maybe you get equity at that point of time. After 2 or 3 years, you get certain equity or certain stocks of the company, so that you are compensated well, and the company will go ahead and pick up. So the different ways on which you can structure it. But the best way is, and there's no best way, but I think one of the ways is, if you are a small team and you're looking to hire people, let's say as co-founders or in senior positions, then to build that core team, give them, even if it takes equity, give equity. But it's very important to have the right team when you start off. So that is how you start, by paying your people. I hope that answers the question, Aman. Guys, any more questions? Any more questions? Yeah. Mohammed, you've raised your hands. Please go ahead. Mohammed, go ahead, please. Yeah. You're on.
Mohammed, please switch on your mic and start speaking. Mohammed.
Hello. Hello, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I have a startup idea of an application. Is there any registration required to that?
You have a, sorry, can you come again? You have a startup idea application.
Is there any registration required for that? A private limited or that?
Yeah. So startup idea registration, see, ideas don't get registered, right? So you when you sort of go ahead and make your idea into a company, into a startup, that is when first you register your company. So companies get registered, idea don't. But idea, you can still register it on Startup India's website. Startup India has a portal, it's called an idea page. You can go ahead and post your idea to get feedback from people, right? So that is something that I sort of acknowledge you, but
is there any point to register that a private limited or public limited is something? Is there any level or stage?
So no stage, but whenever you start generating, you start having customers, you start generating the revenue, you start also selling your product. Because again, when you have to sell your product, you have to get a license approval. If let's say it's a food product, you have to get FSSAI license. If it's let's say if it's a safety product, you have to get necessary license from regulatory bodies, government bodies, right? So of course, then go ahead and register your company. When you start getting those early level of traction, that sales is when you ideally go ahead and start registering your startup. But if you're serious about it, I would say register it on day one, right? Don't take a chance. Don't register it. Registration is not that expensive as well, right? So go ahead, register your startup, and be safe. Take precautions. And, register your company from day one. All right.
Any further questions? You can raise your hand and I can allow you to speak and directly ask your question to Aditya. All right, Aditya, you may want to go ahead. Anything left?
Yes. Skanda, go ahead, please. And you raise your hands to ask your question.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I have a startup idea and we're in the development stage of the startup. So I just want to know, we have a financial model in plan, but we're not very sure if we'll start making profits in the first 2-3 years. Is it okay if we keep spending our own money, which has been bootstrapped for 3-4 years, even though we are unable to sustain it? Like how long how long in an average does a company take to start making money, an online service-based company?
So Skanda, there is no particular time. I would say that you can say that a company starts, let's say, raising external money, be it online, offline, whatever sort of business. A lot depends on the founder as well, the vision as well, right? Because that gets you funding, right? Initial funding that you get is all on you, and all on your vision, your credibility, and your track record. So you bootstrap it till the max you can, I would say. A capital in India, the round that you sort of start raising, typically takes about 2 to 3 months to close. That is something that I can tell you, even more, like depending. But ideally, it takes about 2 months for you to close a round. So start maybe whenever, let's say you are at the end of your 2 months of your bootstrap capital. Before that, start getting into conversations with investors. Start trying and raise capital, because that is when, of course, it will take time to close. So by the time you max out your capital, you engage with investors, and you would have, let's say, gone ahead and raised capital. That is how you plan your journey. Every time a startup is raising capital, it's extending that runway that I will survive for another these many months by burning capital. That's how you sort of go ahead and sort of do that stuff.
Sure, got it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good. Any more questions? Great. Guys, if you loved the session, do write Faad in the chat. I think that would help me to also understand how you guys loved it. So if you actually loved it, write Faad in the chat. Yep. Thanks. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. So yeah, I think Arun done for the day of questions. So yeah, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Aditya, and thank you everyone for joining in. I definitely trust that this session would help you out with some tactics to scale up your startup, to go deeper into your ideas, as well as to find some better strategies to execute your startup ideas. With this, I thank you, Aditya, once again, and thank you everyone for joining in today. We'll keep on organizing these sessions for our cohort of TiE University. Please keep an eye on our group chat and look forward to a later sessions with you all, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Team TiE Rajasthan. Thank you, guys. All the best in your startups.
Thank you, Aditya. Bye.